Kia ora, hui hui, tātou katoa. We will get underway and I'll ask Councillor Anderson to open our council meeting with a karakia.
Ngā mihi o te wiki, ngā mihi o te wiki o te reo Māori. Happy Māori Language Week. Whakalawhalahi atu ki Matolosi e tau mātua hoi tau e lifu kua umai hea honei. Welcome everyone in the room. It's a New Wayne greeting and a little bit more formal. Let us pray. Ko hao motulu a matua hahahi langi, ole atua matua ma matua, whawhunga mai kehe whatapotopoto anga nei hao motulu, whakamonoina mai au motulu, kia haku mua tonu, e tau ngā hoa he koe, hingoa tapu ha iso koriso, ko hao motulu aiki, amene.
Amene.
Translation for that is, Dear Lord, our Father in heaven, we ask you, Heavenly Father, look down on our gathering here with your blessings, that we may do and say what is right. In the name of our Saviour Jesus Christ, amen.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. Tēnā koutou katoa, tata kua hui hui mai nai, ko Nick Smith aho, ko o te koro mātua o whakatū. I do acknowledge it is Maori Language Week. I've got experts in Maori language like Councillor Pakipaki and Councillor Anderson. I am a work in progress, but I do acknowledge that it's actually 51 years ago to the day that the petition was presented Parliament for the recognition of Te Reo. I want to acknowledge and welcome one of our youth councillors, Astrid Sayer, to the meeting. Welcome her engagement in the meeting. And seated between Councillor Rainey and Councillor Rollo, you will have the best of advice as we work through the proceedings of the day. There are mixed news around the council table on that, Astrid. Warm welcome. Can I just also acknowledge that Councillor Rainey has an apology from 11 o'clock because of having to travel to the North Island and would like to. Are there any other apologies? There are no others, but I note that from 11, Pete. Might be silly. We'll say. Yeah, okay. It's a challenge for me. So can I move by Mel Courtney that an apology from 10:30 from Councillor Rainey is accepted. All those in, I'll second from the chair. All those in favour, please say aye. Look, I have had some feedback from councillors to take a bit more of a formal approach to the dealing with items, and it is my intention to take that approach today with a bit clearer separation between the questions and between the formal moving of motions and debate. For each report, including my mayor's report, we will have questions on the report quite narrowly. And then what we will do is we'll have a former mover and seconder, and then each person will have the opportunity to debate with the right of reply for the mover. I don't want to be too rigid because sometimes a degree of informality can help us get to a better place. So it's, and can I also say to councillors, I welcome your feedback. I'm on a learning curve as your mayor and chair, want to try and get that balance right, but just want to signal at the beginning of this meeting taking a bit more of a formal approach. Can I also say I've received an amendment from Councillor Courtney, seconded by Councillor Benge, seeking the withdrawal of Plan Change 29 and further consultation on it as a draft. I've had a notification from council officers that that does raise legal implications. It is standard council practice, and as Mayor, I strongly support that when we receive legal advice, we do need to do that in confidence, or we actually put the organisation at risk. Nobody shares their legal advice with those that might want to take legal action against them. And so when that item comes up, it is my intention to move into confidential business. I apologise to media and members of the public that you'll need to leave at that time. I know that's a bit disruptive, but it's, in my view, the right way to handle that advice from our officials. Are there any interests that member would want to declare for today's agenda? If that being the case, we will move to the public forum, and I'd like to invite the Nelson Tasman Pacifica Community Trust to come before council. Very warm welcome to you. Thank you for the work that you do in the community. We've set aside 10 minutes, including opportunity for questions. If you keep it a bit shorter, we can have a little bit more engagement, but totally over to you, a warm welcome.
Kia ora marurira ia kole ke u whangatu e hingahi talawhakatapu ko au whaaki. Kai ata mo au ke o atu ai whakamalo ko Hoki Unga Wā, ko Lopeti Blake, ka o hau me Kolomatua. Just like to acknowledge the Honourable Dr. Nick Smith and councillors. Malo pito, Councillor Matty Anderson, for your prayer this morning. So my name's Robert Blake. I'm the General Manager of the Nelson Tasman Pacifica Community Trust. So a little bit about us is the Nelson Tasman Pacifica Community Trust has existed in the Nelson Tasman area for more than 30 years now. So we're a non-government organisation providing health, social and education services to our Pacific community here. We support, advocate for Pacific people both regionally and nationally. And our office is just down the road here at 53 Collingwood. So I was running a little bit late so I could run here today. Hence why I'm out of breath. Those are our offices there, just located just across the road from the local mobile station or Damon Motors. So the door's always open to councillors and the Honourable Mayor. So please walk in. Our mission is to provide support, strengthen the Nelson Tasman Pacific community to grow and prosper. Our vision is a strong, united organisation which represents the needs and goals of all our Pacifica community, working in response to and alongside the community, advocating for our community and culture. We have 9 board members. They cover the Fijians, Samoans, Tongans and Cook Islanders, so they represent our Pacific community. We do have members of our organisation that are Tuvalu Ni Vanuatu, which are representative of RSE community. We've quite a lot of staff. We've got 2 registered nurses, whānau order navigators, Check and Connect mentor who gets into our schools and ensures that our kids are engaged in school, which is very important. We've got an education coordinator, IT administrator, an administration team, and there's accounts and myself as general manager. This is our team. We've roughly got, there's 9 there, but there's 2 extra that are missing. So these are the team. We actually find that it's better to be active in our community rather than being in the office, and getting around to getting out and about, seeing our community. Oh, sorry, I went backwards. Service to the community. So during COVID, the Pacific community here was adversely affected, meaning that there was more Pacifica affected during COVID than any other group. So our small organisation managed to touch roughly around about 1,900 individuals that we supported through that was self-isolating. So we supplied food, kai packs and medical self-isolation packs for them. That was separate to RSE. So our team had to go out and support a lot of RSE that we found that were self-isolating when local business couldn't afford to help. We were there to help our Pacific people. During the floods, we helped with food, water, and temporary housing. Please bear in mind that this was all this was funded from our organisation. We did work closely with council groups and things like that to ensure that our Pacific people were fine. We did. There was civil defence that we liaised with as well. So, as part of our education program, we have our after-school program. This is designed for primary school kids all the way through to high school. We run driver's license courses, holiday programs, computer course, our Talanoa Ako computer program. So that runs in conjunction with our after-school program. And the reason behind that is what we've found is that our youth are actually quite resourceful in the fact that because our parents, their second language is English, our kids were actually had their own email addresses, and little Sione would have all the school reports and things like that sent home. So mum and dad weren't necessarily finding out that Sione wasn't at school. So hence we run a computer program which teaches our parents to access emails, get onto the school intranet, liaise with teachers. And at the end of that course, they're actually given a laptop to take home. So that allows connection between the school and our families, which is important to, we see that education is very important for our Pacific population here in Nelson. We run a youth mentoring program that I spoke about earlier, ensuring that youth are attending school. We have one person that roughly will see around about 250 kids. Of that, there's about 10% of those that are high needs. So ensuring that they are not disruptive in class, coming to school, helping them with homework and things like that. We also run a high school transition program, because often kids, we find when they get their timetable or anything like that at a high school for children with English as their second language, they find it hard to navigate our schools. Health. So we have our nursing team actually get into the hospitals. We visit home visits. We run vaccination clinics, flu and MMR. We run health checks for our local population. We also advocate for our people. It's important to remember that our services through our health team is actually a life service. So as you see, there's a picture there up in the top left-hand corner of little Samson Tuipolotu, who was born. And there's also another gentleman, Sione, that was part of our community, who unfortunately passed away. So our nursing team advocate, and they actually explain. Often our Pacific people don't understand terminology, medical terminology. And our team gets in there and can explain things. And often all that our people are wanting really is some food, some different types of food and things like that. Family visits. Just to support them. Working with communities, our organisation, we actually resource our local communities. So we've helped with the Tongan Relief Fund, where we, with the help of local iwi, we supported a container to go to Tonga. We've resourced the Samoan community to hold Independence Day celebrations, as well as the Fijian community. All this funding has come from us, but it's important that we support other communities as well to grow, because it's better. Actually, it's better for our Nelson Tasman area. Our Pacific population here in Nelson is roughly around about 2,055. That's according to the census in 2018. Raw data from census shows that the Pacific population has grown in Nelson, some areas in the Nelson Tasman area by more than 100%. The Tasman, Nelson, Marlborough, West Coast area has 63% of the population are of working age. So meaning that we've got the potential to have a lot of jobs in this area. So a lot of our Pacific people are actually employed in primary industry. And what we're finding is the Pacific population is actually quite transient, and people are moving in from other areas of New Zealand to us, which contributes to the local economy, and we become employers, voters and taxpayers. So the growth of the Pacific population will help the Pacific people become the labouring backbone or the labour force for the Nelson Tasman area. So the opportunities for us is we'd like to partner with council to see if there's any land or buildings available. The reason behind that is our strategic plan is actually for a cultural hub to run our services from. And that would encompass other communities as well, if there's an opportunity for that. And yeah, it's, if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to take some if I can.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and but more importantly, for the work that you're doing with our growing Pacific community. I've got time for a couple of questions. I'm going to start with Councillor Courtney and then Councillor Sanson. We are going to have to keep it tight with our big agenda. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mayor Nick, and through you to Robert. Thank you so much for your report. We needed that. I think there's a gap in our knowledge there, a big gap. So thank you for filling it so well. I'm curious to know, because you said a lot of your activities are funded by your organisation, by your trust. Where do you replenish? How do you replenish those funds? Is there?
So a lot of our Councillor Courtney, a lot of our funding, we actually funded through whānau order. We're from our whānau order. How could I say, a commissioning agent, which is Pacifica Futures. We actually have contracts with Te Whatu Order to run our health programs and things like that. We're actually funded by council too to run a youth program. Thank you. So what we do is some money that we set aside, and that's what we do. We set aside money. There's a certain amount for each community, each Pacific community per year, that we set aside to help assist our communities run programs that they are wanting to run.
Councillor Sanson.
Thanks through the chair. Kia ora, Robert. Thanks very much for coming along, and yeah, just concur with Councillor Courtney that it's really, there is a knowledge gap for us here, and I really appreciate you coming along. I'm aware that there is, pay inequity for Pacifica peoples. Women, I think Pacifica women are, earn the lowest in New Zealand. So I imagine that things like the living wage are important for Pacific community, but what I'm really interested in is housing challenges. Like, is our Pacifica community facing housing insecurity, housing vulnerability?
Yes, they are. Often, I'll just use this. The other week we went to a home. It was meant to have 3 people, and it actually had 12. So when I was saying earlier about housing, families being quite transient, families. So what's actually happening is they just turn up and they knock on the door. We're quite fortunate with MSD. They're very supportive of us, and we have a good relationships with them to help house our Pacific people or anybody that's in need that comes to us. But the majority of our population are renting. They're not actual homeowners as such. Yeah.
Councillor
Okay,
Anson.
thanks.
Maloto, just very quickly, so you mentioned interested in land or freeing council being able to free something up. Just very quickly, what do you mean by a community hub? What would that look like?
So there will be a hub where we could have cultural events. Councillor Anderson, cultural events run all our services, meaning that we would welcome a GP clinic, run our educational services out of there, our whānau order services. That venue be available for community programs such as the Samoan Independence Day or the Fijian Day, Fiji Day, anything to do with supporting our local community, as well as housing our local community councils and being able to have meetings.
It'd be chock-a-block, eh?
There'll be heaps of people.
Can I just acknowledge Councillor Anderson and his work with the Pacific community as our liaison officer. Councillors have an opportunity to write a column in our Nelson, and whether it be members of the public or councillors, Councillor Anderson's column is just excellent in supporting your community. Robert, can I thank you for the work? This community needs to acknowledge how much of our core industries like fishing and horticulture, the hard work, hard mihi, is being done by your community. I have some concerns that are shared by Councillor Anderson of the risks of exploitation, particularly around making sure that RSC scheme works really well. And we're really keen as a council to work with you to address the very issues that you've so competently covered in your presentation and ensure this is a community that we work with, that we grow and we assist. I'd also say, just in terms of the character of New Zealand and Nelson, is that we're becoming more of a nation of the Asia Pacific. I think the Pacific add character to our nation and to this community. And on that cultural side as well, we have work to do for the benefit of all of our community. Thank you again for your work, Robert, and we look forward to the further engagement.
Thank you very much.
I would now like to invite Anne Rush from Makeshift Spaces to the public forum. I also want to acknowledge, in my 33 years of being an elected representative of this community, Anne Rush has been at the cutting edge of so much of the art and cultural growth of the city. I'm a huge fan of the art space work. And if there's any comment that I have had from visiting mayors to Nelson when I catch up with them, is they see these beautiful pieces of art displayed around our city and they're jealous and they want to know how we do it. Please don't let out all of our secrets.
Well, this is another, we would like to report a piece of great news around the shared communities. And I'd like to, oh, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, we'd like to acknowledge this great shared community project. And I would like to introduce my two colleagues here, Anna Fife. Well, Anna, you introduce yourself.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Anna Fife Tukurunga. I'm the manager at Multicultural Nelson Tasman. Thanks for having us.
Kia ora koutou, Lloyd Harwood from Arts Council Nelson.
And we have one other partner who's sitting over in the corner. He's not allowed to sit here, and that's Bill Hupler from Nelson City Council. But we must acknowledge Bill is a very pivotal part of our partnership here. So where are we? I'll shift this. Can you shift that?
Too old, we haven't got our glasses on, that's what we're doing. Right.
That's that wrong.
Yeah. So there was a huge opportunity came from the Ministry of Culture and Heritage. And in 2022, we were able to gain $20,000 to commission this authentic engagement report from the migrant and former refugee community. It was a big wake-up call for a lot of us, and there's actually some really potent information here about the council as well, about the barriers that people, our migrant community face. So we formed a shared communities consortium, and there are the four partners which I've just mentioned on there. There's the four of us, and we bid to the Ministry of Culture and Heritage, and we brought $265,000 into the region to deliver this program in this financial year. We have to spend this money by June the 30th, 2024. Next one. One of the very interesting things that a lot of people do not are aware of is that 23.9% of Nelson's population are born overseas, and that was the 2018 census. We are reputedly to be the third most culturally diverse city in New Zealand, and but I think the overall perception are that we may be white and grey. And I think this is a huge wake-up call, and I'm very interested in Robert's presentation prior to this. It's a similar territory, that in the 10-year plan, this lens needs to be put on the the fact that we are becoming a much more culturally diverse city, and we need to actually address some of the issues to make these people more comfortable, and for us as the residents become more aware. Next one. So how are we going to meet the challenge? We've been able to appoint a cultural navigator, and her name is Carolina Serrano. She's from the Colombian community, and she's a fluent Spanish speaker. We're going to consult community. We've got an advisory group that meets quarterly from the former refugee and migrant communities that are feeding in quality information of how we can deliver this. We've got $75,000 to fund migrant and former refugee arts, cultural and heritage projects. And we want to improve the cultural competency of the existing arts, cultural and heritage sector. And this is really interesting because this report, and you'll see the quotes on the previous page, it was a realisation from the normal institutions here that they don't really make, their programming is not really opening up for migrant and former refugee communities. And so there's a big challenge for us to get more culturally competent and understanding that. But I can honestly say that already this report has done amazing outcomes. And for instance, Taramaroa, we gave $2,000 to help fund the performance program. I was astounded to hear that 50% of the performers that performed on the Taramaroa stage were migrant performers. And it's not only just the performers, it's the community seeing their people in our community doing their, whether it's Indian dance or music. But arts, culture and heritage is a vehicle for wonderful things to happen. So what are the challenges for us? It's to maintain authentic engagement, not work on an assumption model. Talk to these people. They know exactly what they can do, and they've got these riches beyond belief in these communities. We need to try and make them feel more comfortable here. They're our migrant workforce. They also, if you go around the Nelson Market, you go count how many ethnic food stalls are there. They're feeding us. They're bringing their own traditions to our town right before our eyes. But we need to be better at how we accommodate these people. If they feel more comfortable here, they're going to stay and make contributions. We need to improve access and participation. And as a community, we need to be much more aware of cross-cultural awareness of who's here, why they're here. Many of them come with trauma, so that raises all sorts of mental health issues and things like that. So that's our last slide. So no, that's it. That's it.
Oh, that's it.
I think the only other thing I would say that Radio New Zealand reported in the last week about the enormous increase in migrant arrivals. So the migrants, and we see them in our bus drivers around the city and also in our workforce, they're everywhere. And it's really important to in the 10-year plan to start addressing these issues, Ev. And I'll just give you one example. I was sitting downstairs waiting for a meeting recently with, I think it was Bill Hupler, and I watched I presume it was a migrant coming from Colombia to come into the Nelson Council office to buy a B card, I think. It was a huge effort for that woman to try and make her understood at the bottom desk. And, even language services in your own organisation, or even having someone there who can speak Spanish one day a week, or there's lots of really simple things. We're going to send you our first Shared Communities newsletter, and we're very proud to launch a website which is totally bilingual, and so the communities can look at the press a button and it can be translated for them. So there's all sorts of new digital techniques that we can use. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for acknowledging Bill. Exciting, challenging
Absolutely,
space.
and the council. And I think we're all not-for-profit organisations, and we are funded by council in various ways. And I think that's really important to say that if you empower or facilitate us with a bit of resource, we can actually bring other money in from other sources to help our community. So when you're looking at your 10-year plan, just watch how you're funding not-for-profit organisations, because not just what they can bring in, it's actually the volunteer sector they have behind them. It's enormous. And if we are not able to do our job, well, less will happen in the community. Yeah.
Can I also acknowledge the Arts Council and the Multicultural Council for your help and support? Got time for maybe one quick question if there's a burning one. Rachel?
Thanks through the chair. Kia ora, and Emma and Lloyd. Thanks very much. Yeah, and Bill and Alison. So I gather from the presentation that there's going to be a $75,000 fund, maybe would it be a contestable fund or no?
Heather, you could answer this if you like.
No, it can't be a contestable fund. That's part of the agreement with the Ministry of Culture and Heritage. So yeah.
That's fine. No,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's basically open application.
Yeah.
Yep, great.
And any group can actually
Try and reduce
just
the
write,
barriers.
Yeah.
and we have an assessment panel.
It's a
section
conversation
panel.
rather than an assessment, and the sort of traditional funding model. That's what we're trying to get away from.
And then, so what kinds of initiatives are proposed with the balance, which, the 265,000?
What type of
What other
projects?
kinds of initiatives are proposed with the balance of the funding, the other, about 190K?
The employment of a cultural navigator.
Yeah.
We have $20,000 to do a review because we believe because this is a citywide project, and I know in Wellington they're very interested in it. They never had any other application remotely like this, of having a consortium with fingers to all sorts of places to bring projects into the community.
There's also cross-cultural awareness training for the organisation. So if you think of places like SUTA, the museum, so the staff working within the typical sort of arts, culture and heritage institutions. There's also a field trip, I believe, planned.
Yeah.
So that communities can be introduced to all the spaces and venues that they might want to use. Yeah, there's a lot of milestones hanging under the project.
And that will be covered in the newsletter, will it? It's really interesting.
Well, the thing is, the website, if you know of any organisations, and we want this to come from the grassroots, it's not for us to determine. That already we have 2 projects that are ethnic festivals from that have registered, but people, and the navigator will be able to help. Often it's just trying to find a venue. They have no idea how to do it. It's just that kind of leading and helping on the way. But it's experimental, but we're very excited by it.
Thank you for the presentation. The part that I'm really excited about your work and the step on from the makeshift is the including of that multicultural community. There is commentary sometimes about the difficulties in our community with racism. And my view is using art as a vehicle for which this council can better embrace the range of people here is a really smart move. I commend you on the initiative and recommit the council to working with you to ensure that it is successful. Thank you for your presentation today.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite Jackie Garland, Giving Araha, Rough Sleepers and the most vulnerable in our community.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Jackie. Thank you for applying for the public. The forum is yours. We've got 10 minutes to decide. You know the drill.
Okay, thank you. Well, kia ora, everyone. My name is Jackie Galland. I'm the founding member of Giving Araha here in Nelson. Some of you might say, what's Giving Araha? Giving Araha is a community-based project that we started 4.5 years ago, which is growing into something pretty big in this town. We provide a meal every Sunday for our homeless people, which is definitely increasing in this town at the moment. We offer support. We We just do everything with them. Like if there's a need for a homeless person to have a tent, we supply a tent. If they need a cooker or sleeping bags, things like that, we supply it. Now, we're not government funded. We're not a registered charity, so we don't get any funding. We've had no funding from the council so far, but we're here today to say, hey, we would like some. We've made a big stand in this town. We work with the police, we work with schools, agencies. We just have a need to be here in this community. You know, there's agencies out there that are getting millions of dollars to sort our homeless problem out. And it just seems to be getting wasted and wasted and wasted, and the problem still exists. There was a local agency that got $250,000 last year to help sort our homeless and get them off the streets. They set up a committee, spent all the money on committees. You know, it's no longer good enough that this money is wasted. We know we can run a shelter. Last year in the floods, we opened the Unite Church as a shelter. We ran it very, very successfully for 6 weeks out of our funding. We didn't get anyone else giving us money or anything like that. Our funding comes solely from our community. 2 weeks ago, we were running a bit short of the funds. We were down to our last $1,000 in our bank account. We put a shout out on our Facebook page, which told me we've got a village behind us. We raised $5,000 in 24 hours through one Facebook post. Now, if we can do that, we can do pretty much anything. We are in the process of registering, but that takes time, and our homeless don't have time. All through winter, I've been going out there doing dinner rounds. I leave my home about between 5 and 6 every night. I go around with pots of soup, takeaways made into containers. I usually deal with about 15 to 20 homeless people, where we see 3 in town in shop corners. There's 20 out there in camps, in tents, in cars. Well, there's probably more than that if you take the ones in cars as well. You know, that all these people want is a place to put their head down for the night, and yet there doesn't seem to be a place here in Nelson for that. You know, they don't want to be harassed by agencies when they go to look for a bed for the night. They don't want to have to sign multiple contracts and be told these are the rules. All they want is a night sleep where they're comfortable, they can have a shower, they can have kai. A year and a half ago, our night shelter here in Nelson closed. It wasn't being run and managed properly, and that was a lot of the reason why it closed. You know, a shelter here is an important thing for our people. You know, we do have people that don't fit into the agency's criterias and all that sort of stuff. You know, like I say, all they want is a night where they can put their head down and be warm, comfortable, and have full belly. You know, there's nowhere in this town that supplies that. And that's pretty shameful when we've got people on the street. You know, like I say, I went out doing dinner rounds up until 6 weeks ago when I took my grandson on. And, you know, I've had to pull back a lot. And I need help running Giving Araha now. I can't keep doing it on my own with my team. We have a huge amount of volunteers on our team who are all hugely credible in this town. You know, they support us. I look around this room here and I see at least 6 of these councillors here in front of me that have been either to our meal or volunteered at some stage, including our mayor. You've been to our meal before COVID. You know, when I see that, I say, why can't you guys help us? You know, we're just a little group of people, and we could be bigger. We could be more important in this town, and we can show people and educate people about homelessness. You know, people look at homelessness as, you know, they're dirty, smelly people that steal, drug addictions, and all that. Well, yes, some of them are, but some of them are on the street, not by choice. And that's the sad part about homelessness. You know, I look at them and I say, what if that was your husband, your wife, your children, a family member? Would you like someone to look after them? Because I would. You know, Giving Araha does that here in this town. We don't go around yelling out what we do. We do it quite quietly. In the last 4 years, we've raised over $60,000 that hasn't been just handed to us. We've gone and looked for that. It hasn't come from any agencies or government or anything like that, or councils. It's come from our village. You know, I've always said it takes a village to run a village. And we've got a pretty awesome village here in this town, and we need to start using it. You know, agencies aren't getting anywhere. And quite honestly, from my point of view, they're making quite a big mess of things. It's not sorting the problem. It's just feeding their greedy pockets, quite honestly. None of my team get paid for what we do. I used to, up until 6 weeks ago, work up to 60 hours a week voluntarily. I have other team members here today that have also worked those numbers and hours as well. We also have a person that's homeless here today that is on my team. You know, I look at up here and I go, which one is he? Because no one would know. You know, homelessness is a problem in this town, and I'm asking the council in any way, shape or form, if you can help us, please do. We need funding. We need a shelter. We're happy to run it if you're happy to provide it.
Thank you. Firstly, I think it shows the value of the public forum, that difficult issues before council are confronted for your presentation. I think collectively the council would want to acknowledge, Jackie, both your work and your team that is here. On the council's agenda today, we have a proposal to extend the terms of reference for the task force, and can I acknowledge Councillor Sanson, who's been chairing that work. The initial focus of that work was around getting growth in the community housing, and to acknowledge the task force have done such a good job of that, we want to give them more work, and we're proposing today a particular focus in this area. I'd also note some of the challenges that we've had in Trafalgar Street outside the museum that reinforce the need for us to do more in this space. Happy to take questions from colleagues, and I'll have Councillor Skinner.
Hey, thank you, Jackie, and thank you for your work done over a number of years, and those before you and those currently helping you. Much appreciated. And as I see, I know you very much see, every member in Nelson is a responsibility of us as a village. Like bring up a child as a village responsibility, and we're all children, whatever age we are growing up. Can you tell me, am I right? I see we've had just recently quite an increase in people finding themselves on the streets. Is that right? It seems to be, I get the impression, about threefold. And is that because of this failure of coming to fruition, the Housing First scheme, which I had high hopes in 3 or 4 years ago, and that hasn't seemed to come to fruition of any scale? And I see those that were meant for that, or that was to facilitate, are in the backpackers, and now the backpackers aren't having those people in between streets or a flatting situation. And if that is the case, what can we do?
I believe that this is a lot to do with Housing First. They don't seem to know what they're doing. From my point of view, I have seen them change rules pretty much monthly on these people. These people are huge addicts, and mental health is just rampant. You know, Housing First say they've got wraparound services to deal with all of this, and yet they're still kicking people out. You know, I know of 2 people that were kicked out of the motels for smoking a cigarette in their bedrooms.
Yeah.
You know, that to me is setting up these people for failure. And that's what I'm seeing time and time again with Housing First. I believe that they've been given huge amounts of funding to have actually made the problem worse. I believe this does stem from Housing First. And the wraparound services that they say they provide,
Haven't
which they're not providing.
I just want to note that I need to be careful about issues of natural justice. Housing First work in a really difficult space. For my part as mayor, I think they do a really good job. And so I'm cautious of too much criticism, albeit my view is that we do need to hear different points of view. It is the scale of the challenge of the problem where I think the council needs to be
Just,
doing more.
Just response to that, and just
Yeah.
response to that, Nick, it's really a good opportunity for me to ask a question and for letting the presenter to present what
The
their
only
views
thing-
are,
Yeah,
whether we agree
Order,
or
please.
disagree. This is a forum to
Order,
listen to that.
please.
I'll just follow up on that, and this is
No,
what
no, order, please. You've raised an order about the way in which I chair the meeting. I do intend, as mayor, to operate principles of natural justice, and that is where organisations are being criticised. I think it's important that the council just note that there will be other points of view. I do not want public forum turning into a place where organisations in this community are excessively criticised, and that is why I believe I quite properly just wanted to give a balance of opinion, given that an organisation has been criticised. We're not providing them with the right reply. Back to you, Tim.
Yeah, thank you. And I just and thank you for your response and presentation. And just if there is an area, scratch an area we can help, and not asking or expecting you to answer this, but to the chair and CEO. I was up at the Brook camp and I've seen the cabins are empty again, completely empty, and it hurts me to think there's people that could make use of those cabins. And it's something I've fought for in the past, and we have utilised them extremely well in the past. And I realise there's limitations on how and what we can do, but I do ask with the new mayor and the new CEO, please relook and reconsider our Brook cabins, which are sitting idle, empty, and in incredibly good condition and unutilised. And this may be an area to some degree, with the right services and the right attention. And I'd like to very much champion that. But I ask that you consider that. Thank you.
Sure. And the council currently has an RFP out about the future of Brook, because I think it is shared by both the chief executive and myself that there needs to be a change in the way that's operated. Are there any further questions for Giving Araha today? Sorry, Matty, you already had your hand up. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. I know Jackie, she's a force of nature, and her advocacy and passion has not made her many friends in the past. She's doing a great job at the moment, biting her tongue. And your work's amazing, Jackie. I do feel that you need to be part of the conversation, because there's a lot happening you don't know about, which is unfair. I do have a question. How many of you guys die a year, you reckon? Just a rough number.
In the 4 years I've been doing this, I've had 14 die. 14 homeless people die. I've actually cut a person down from a tree that was attempting suicide. I've called emergency services several times on our homeless. Myself and a team member that's here today have gone through a camp looking for a dead body, which luckily we didn't find. But yeah, they're getting sick out there and they need help.
That last question, Matty, really emphasises to us the compassion as well as the smart nous that we have. Thank you again for your presentation, for your challenge, and for being confronting and direct. That is welcomed. It is my perspective that council can play a positive role here in getting our different community organisations to do better in this space, and we'll come back later on the agenda. But again, thank you for your presentation today, and more importantly, for the work and the support that you give to some of the most vulnerable in our community.
Thank you. I'd just like to say finally, if anyone would like to join our meals and come and see what we do, we're down at Pioneer Hall every Sunday at 4 p.m. Thank you.
Good on you. It's good that we keep ourselves in touch with that community. I now come to item 5 on the agenda, which is the confirmation of minutes covered on pages 11 to 33 in our agenda. The first is for the meeting of the 10th of August. Is a member prepared to move the adoption of those minutes? Thank you, Councillor Courtney. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Brand. All those in favour of the adoption of the minutes of the meeting of the 10th of August, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no. Is there a mover for the minutes of the 17th of August?
I'll waive one of those.
Thank you, Campbell Rollo is moving the adoption of the minutes of the 17th of August. Is there a seconder to that? Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no. Those minutes are also adopted. I'd now like to invite. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the Saxton Field Committee's report and recommendations to be presented by Councillor Skinner and Councillor Rollo, contained on items page 34 of the council agenda. I'll hand the floor over to Councillor Skinner.
Thank you for that. And as you'll see, it's in detail there, and there's also a bit of a spreadsheet with the figures, etc. So I present them what we've got in front of us, recommendation for your consideration.
Did you want to add any comments, Councillor Rollo?
I will be slightly biased and say it's a wonderful presentation, and I think that a lot of people often say to me this joint committee's one that works well, and I completely echo that. In my 1 year of council, I guess we can say, well, 11 months, we've met 3 or 4 times as a joint committee, and what we're doing out there for the community is an awesome job. And in fact, the feedback we're now getting from the users of Saxton's Field is exceptional. And I think what we've got there is a credit to the staff and working with those organisations. And we as the elected are more than happy to bring this to the table today.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
And thank you for that. And it's a very good, that committee is obviously for many years, and it's a good example of two, as you're aware, especially for those who are new to this term. It's an example where 2 councils work extremely well together, and sometimes unfairly the public can think we might be at odds, but quite the opposite. And that committee and several others, actually all of the others combined, get on incredibly well and get a lot done. And if there are differences of views are worked through for the betterment of a region. This is an example, and you might, just in case of confusion, and that might be better for us officer to be presenting this, but I'm happy to. In regards to you made a reading the report in regards to skate facility, and it might seem like a lot of dollars there, but if you see on the adoption recommendation of 1A, it talks about $400,000, but that's not $400,000 out of our pockets, because there's another income line called $320,000 income. So that's really meaning us as a council come forward with 80,000, and the organisation that is behind this comes up with 320,000. So in this situation, rather than the community organisation funding 20% and us the lion's share of 80%, it's the other way around. So we provide 20% and they provide 80%, which is a nice unusual. I was going to call it unusual, but it's a nice unusual. So don't be scared off by that, but it has to be obviously recorded in the budget lines as an amount, and then that's offset by what's called an income of $320,000. So that's something we would be, if it goes through from both councils, something we would support. And obviously as time goes by and before things progress, obviously with finance and money has to come in from the organisation behind this in a staged manner.
Thanks, Councillor Skinner, for pointing that out. Councillor Courtney, and then I'll take Councillor Sanson.
And Nick, through you, could I ask Councillor Skinner a question on budget?
All right, it might be a better one to answer it.
If it's an easy question, I'll give it to someone. If it's tough, I'll give it to Campbell.
Well, who'd like to answer it?
Happy to. We'll both.
Okay. Well, I'm looking at walkways and cycleways at Saxton's Field, and I'm doing a little bit of my own business here now. For somebody, or some people, actually, it talks here every second year about spending 150,000 on new, and I stress here, new walkways, cycleways. And it's every second year, right through the budget. I see that. I want to draw to the attention of our representatives on the Saxton's Field Committee, Councillor Rollo and Skinner, that there are a lot of complaints about the width of the existing pathways, walkways, cycleways in Saxton's Field. They're not practical, particularly at in winter time, for both walkers and cyclists. So my eyes sort of shot open when I saw the word new, because there is some work and some consideration need to be given to the width of these walkways and cycleways that exist now. Thank you.
Councillor Skinner.
Happy to answer. No, thank you for raising it. Obviously, there's the pathways that go through Saxton, and there's also the cycleway, walkway that goes alongside the main road that often can be assumed as part of Saxton, but that's not. But I assume you mean the pathways that weave their way through the. No, I take on board what you got there, but that's a constant development, etc. But I'd like to think they are very wide, but that's good feedback to have, and we have a lot of people come to us, especially about park benches, which we put some more in, people to stop along the way and enjoy the view. But to get clarified, there's a difficulty of both cycling and walking on the same lane. Is that the issue?
That's correct.
Thank you for raising
winter
it.
time when they have to move away.
Thank you.
Councillor Sanson.
Thanks through the chair. I've got a question, a clarification question, really, maybe for the officers, if there's an appropriate officer. So just reading the recommendation, which I'm really happy to support, it says that there's a budget line in years 26, 27 and 27, 28. So that's a total, I think, of 820,000, and it's offset by 320,000 income, which I think would mean a contribution from the councils of 500,000. So that would be a 60% contribution from the councils and a 40% contribution from the users. Is that correct?
No. Kia ora koutou.
Thank you for providing clarity. So
No
can we
problem.
just get on the clarity on the 1A recommendation and those financing.
Certainly. The income line is for both years. So the Skate Nelson Bays are affiliated now with the Lions, and they have really good access to fundraising. So they're very confident that they can raise 80% of the capital and potentially more.
Oh yeah, that's great. Thanks for clarifying. That's really, I've heard already out in the community that there's quite a lot of excitement about it. So
Can I just endorse the work of Tim and Campbell as well as our staff? I think Saxton Field is the single best example of our partnership with Tasman District Council on providing facilities. This piece of work is good. The only sort of condition I'd give is it is, my view, and I think it's chaired by the Chief Executive, that we are going to have a very challenging financial time in putting the long-term plan together. It's appropriate that we note these recommendations, but that until we do the long-term plan and make the really difficult trade-offs, then that needs to be considered, albeit can I take very much on board Councillor Skinner's point of view, and that is when 80% of the funding is being provided by the community, then that makes a pretty strong case for it to be included in the long-term plan, but it's not absolute and we still have to have that discussion. I'll be happy to put the resolution that's been moved by Councillor Skinner, seconded by Councillor Rollo. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, say no. The recommendation's adopted. We come to item 7, the Mayor's report. I intend to take the Mayor's report in different parts because there are different issues. I wish to begin firstly to acknowledge the passing of Councillor Seddon Marshall. I think there would be few councillors that have had much influence over our city over my lifetime as Councillor Marshall. I loved the comment that I included in my report that was passed on to me by a long-serving staff member, that when Mayor Malone was confronted after a council meeting as to how he was going to control Seddon Marshall, he said, "Seddon is like a horse that is bolted. I don't try and stop him. I don't stand in front of him. Rather, I just hung on for the ride and do my best to guide him in the right direction." And I thought that was a wonderfully quaint quote of Seddon Marshall. Can I also acknowledge that big projects like that Maitai Dam and that water treatment plant, and look, you could speak for an hour about all the things that Seddon was involved in. This community is much better and much richer for the community contribution that Seddon Marshall made. As a former fellow councillor of Seddon, I'd like to give the floor to Councillor Courtney.
That's very kind of you, Mayor Nick. I appreciate that. And I want to thank you for the tribute. I'll try and control my emotions because I have some wonderful memories of this gentleman. But I thank you most sincerely for the tribute that you paid to him in your mayor's report. Seddon was an amazing individual. He had wonderful qualities, many I see in you too, Mayor Nick, being a straight talker, telling people exactly, and the council, where he stood on issues. And I really admired that. He had a raft of so many. And I often used to think, as I looked at him across the table, if his life in the earlier years had been different, I think the sky could have been the limit for him, because he was an extremely intelligent man in my judgment. And it was a pleasure working with him. Can I say to you, he had a phrase he would say to Mayor Peter Malone, "Pete, I'll sort that out." Next minute, "I'll sort that out." Very willing to participate and get involved. No operational or governance areas defined at all. "I'll sort it out." Well, goodness gracious me, one day we had a group in the gallery and they were getting very vocal. This was in the chamber when it was in the 1903 Square site. Very vocal. And I heard him say, "I'll have to sort them out." And I thought, yes, and I just went on. And then he out of his seat, up towards him halfway. Well, I thought, he's serious. What's he going to? So I rushed and I grabbed one hand and the councillor, another grabbed the other, and we settled him down. But he was going to sort them out. Look, I want to mention people in his life that loved him and cared for him, and that's his wife, Rosemary.
Yeah.
He couldn't have done that work without her. And she was a lovely lady. And I was opening a campaign headquarters in Hardy Street at some stage, and I had a ribbon to cut. And I was standing on the step, and along came Rosemary to the opening and the cutting of my ribbon for this particular thing. And I thought that was marvellous. And then Catherine, Seddon and Rosemary's daughter, I needed some help from her. I wanted to open my campaign. She didn't hesitate. She was there saying all sorts of things. And I thought, who in the world is she talking about? But anyway, she opened my campaign and that was good. They were so kind and generous people. I want to also mention Ilaria. Ilaria Volker. She has been a lovely companion for Seddon in these later years. Ilaria, what a lovely name, Ilaria. I think it's beautiful. Well, anyway, she has, and we mustn't forget these people as well, these sort of women that have supported this particular man. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask the council and members of the public gallery and staff to stand for a minute silence in respect of Seddon. Thank you. May he rest in peace. I would now like to take items 3, 4 and 5 with respect to the cost sharing package with government as an item, and will formally move from the chair those 3 recommendations. I'll make some opening comments. Then I'd like to take any questions that there are from colleagues, and then we can debate the resolution. My only comments on this is that, firstly, the most challenging part of my work in the first 10 months as being mayor has been this work associated with the August 22 storm recovery. And in that work, there are three key objectives. First is to get the infrastructure and the homes and the city repaired as quickly as possible. Secondly, to build back better, to make our community more resilient, so the next time we are confronted with one of these storm events, that we are better able to cope. And my third objective has been to try and keep the costs to the ratepayer as manageable as possible by doing the work efficiently and by maximising the support that this council gets both from government and from the council's insurers. And in my view, these recommendations are consistent with that. Can I acknowledge Councillor Brand and also Councillor Anderson for the work with the task force and particularly for their support with government officials. Now, my view is that we've made really great progress on much of the infrastructure work, and I particularly want to acknowledge Alec and his team for the progress that's been made there. But the really difficult part of the recovery is those 200 plus landslides, and they are very challenging. A year on, we are now down to a relatively small number of homes and really difficult cases. And we do need to find a pathway for addressing them. I want to commend the team, Alec, that has done the work on those 18 council landslides. I say as someone that has worked on other disasters, that work has been par excellence and has been well led and well done, albeit, and I think you would acknowledge, Alec, there's still quite a lot of uncertainty and complexity moving forward and resolving those. Now, I have to say that I was disappointed that the government declined my request for support in May on those landslides. And it did rub salt in the wound for me that the government was providing huge amounts of support for other communities around the country, like in Hastings, Napier, Auckland, like in Wairau and the Gisborne Tairāwhiti councils. Government agreed after I publicly said that disappointment to send senior officials from the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet to Nelson last month. They were given a comprehensive tour of these very high, very difficult problems to solve. We met with them, with the task force, and we made 5 requests for support. And the government subsequently announced on the 31st of August their support on all of those 5 that are detailed in my report. Now, 3 of those items were simply giving Nelson what they'd offered other communities, that 50-50 support for buying out those unfixable properties, the rental relief for families where their insurance has run out, and in dollar terms, I think this will prove to be the most significant, opening the door for our council to be able to access that multi-billion-dollar resilience fund for some of the infrastructure that we need to improve. The extras that we got in that package that is not currently being offered to those other communities is the $6 million of betterment for those 18 landslides on council land and the $300,000 for the 10-year ongoing monitoring for the Tahunanui slump. I must be honest with you and say that I was pleasantly surprised that they came on board for those 2 additional items. I accept in my report that the most difficult element is the 50-50 proposition around those homeowners that are in the impossible position and have been in a state of limbo for more than a year, where the cost of bringing their property up to a standard where our building officials feel safe for them to reoccupy their home, that the cost of that is so much that they can't get insurance support nor EQC support and are in an impossible position. I accept the position for council is not ideal. My problem is I have no other solution that I know of or someone has mentioned to me that provides a way forward for those property owners. And my further concern is this, and I do understand, and council staff are right to draw to councillors' attention the risk that if we become the owners of those properties, we're effectively owning areas that are unsuitable to build on and are a landslide ongoing risk. But my pragmatic view is that if we have building sites in this community that are not safe to house houses on them, I would rather they were owned by council, that they were planted out as reserves, than were left as derelict and eyesores in our community. I also believe that when the council, at some time in its history, no reflection on current council staff, approved the resource and building consenting in those areas, that we do have some social responsibility. The package that the government has agreed to provides for $6 million of gain, but it also opens up to $6 million of cost on the other side of our 50% share for their properties. I think it is a good deal and a fair deal. I know councillors have quite a lot of questions on the detail, as they should. My commitment to council today is that there will be a workshop within the next fortnight, well before the next council meeting, for us to get down into the nitty-gritty detail of those. What you're being asked to do today is to agree in principle to the package that has been provided by government, but critically, it is subject to that officer's report that will come to our next council meeting. The last somewhat pragmatic view I take is that I worry about the heartache for these families that have been left out. And now more than a year after the storm, they still have their lives in limbo. And I do want us to resolve this quite quickly. Equally so, I'm aware there's a general election on the 14th of October before our next council meeting. It is my view that whoever is the government after the 14th of October is going to face huge fiscal pressures, reinforced by the pre-election fiscal update that came out on Tuesday. It is a matter that if we have agreed in principle, regardless of who is government, at least we lock in that $12.3 million of support for our community to get through. My last points are, if we don't proceed with this package, I think we leave our council exposed, particularly with 5 other councils doing it with a far bigger challenge in places like Wairoa, Napier, Hastings and the like, that we're left in a position of seeming to being less supportive of these people than those areas. And in my view, to refuse to come up with our 50-50 share on those properties is not a position that I think is sustainable for our community. So I make those opening comments. My procedure would be to, this is the Mayor's report. You're most welcome to ask me questions. At the end of that period of questions, it is then my intention as the chair to move it and to seek a seconder and then to enable its debate. So my report on the items associated with the government support package for the last August reform is now open for questions. Start with Councillor Brand.
I would just like to start by saying I'm happy to second this recommendation. Sorry. And you raised some interesting points. I was quite impressed that you managed to get all 5. I thought we would get 3. So I was quite impressed when the information came forward that they were willing to support all 5 points. I'm glad that you raised the risk and that it is in principle that we are accepting this at this stage, as we can then later get down into the detail and work out how we manage the future going forward on those other properties, where it does open that risk to council. However, I do agree about the resource consents and feel that council has a social responsibility, as we were the organisation that granted those resource consents to build there in the first place. So as a community, I feel that this acknowledges that we are here for our community, that we want to ensure that we wrap around our community, and it is a community social responsibility to ensure that we do not create a disadvantage to those families and those people who are under extreme stress, extreme financial pressures, and have gone through quite a traumatic experience, and that we can help alleviate that as we move forward to a resolution.
Thank you, Councillor Brand, and thank you for seconding the resolution. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you for that, and yeah, extremely well done in being in the era of Grant Robertson, etc., and for coming to the table on this, just to ensure that we're doing this well and proper, and not ahead of ourselves. I sort of raised 3.17 of the Mayor's report there in regards to council officers' concerns, and it's right and good that they provide concerns for our consideration. Just checking out how you've considered that. I see you're saying there's no other sort of way to get around that. If we got 14 properties to buy out and the government is contributing 50% up to $6 million, there's $6 million or $12 million in total. Is that going to cover all those 14 properties? All that? Are we, in simple terms, is it a square half being paid by government and half being paid by us? Or are we going to be short?
Sure. So firstly, in answer to your question, council officers have been right to highlight the risks, and this is not without risk. I think the concerns for council staff would be 4 points, if I could summarise them, and I'm happy for the Chief Executive to highlight them further. The first is we cannot be absolutely sure of the number of properties because until all the geotech reports are done, the key test is whether the cost of the fix is more than what the properties are worth, and not everybody has got all those geotech and information. In response to that risk, it is my view that council should limit its support to just 14 and not to more than $6 million. And if more come than that, we should go back to government for additional support. The second risk that staff have identified has been we do not know what the cost will be of the removal of the buildings from those sites. How much could you recover from the buildings that are there relative to the cost of removing them? And that is a little bit unknown. You'll get something for the buildings and the recovery. The third area of risk is what is the cost of then replanting that area out if you were going to. And my personal view is that if these areas in our city should not be built upon, then we should plant them out in some form, and that cost. And then the final risk is there is some concern, I think, from council officials, Nigel, about the precedent that you are setting. I think that is a legitimate concern, albeit my view is that council will decide each one of these on their merit. I would not want us to say that we would always do this, but it is my view that you have 6 other councils around New Zealand that are doing this, and it's a pragmatic response to the extraordinary events that occurred in August. I'd be happy for the Chief Executive or other staff to further expand on the question, Tim, Councillor Skinner, because it is important.
So I've got a few questions. I'll let you.
Yeah, I'd just like to, would the Chief Executive like to further explain item on the identification of the risks? Nigel?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Alec may wish to jump in, but the truth is I don't have my advice from my officials yet on this problem. It's an extremely difficult problem. I accept that, and as Nick says, we haven't yet found a solution. But as the Chief Executive of the council that's responsible for the finances of the organisation, I am worried. I'm deeply worried about the precedent. But I also acknowledge and entirely next efforts to get where we've got to and to help resolve this problem. My preference is that we come to you with the full facts, or as best we can give them to you. We're never going to be able to give you the full facts because, of course, things change. If we buy these properties, this land, we inherit a potential landslip for the future. It could happen in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. So we've got to go into this, or you have got to make, as elected officials, have got to make a decision with your eyes wide open and understand what we may be open to. So it's a gnarly problem. It's a difficult one, but I want to bring you the full facts before you make a decision. Is my preference.
And the recommendation 3 notes subject to an officer's report detailing the implications and future costs to council. So by deciding in principle, we're signalling to the government, yes, we're happy, subject to that officer's report. And there'll be a full officer's report for us to be able to interrogate that at that time. Councillor Skinner, I'll finish Councillor Skinner's questions, and then I'm happy to take further questions.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Nigel, on that. Obviously, this is quite an emotive topic and an important topic, and it's quite ironic that we've got this situation of homelessness, and we've just had Jackie Garland with a homelessness of 100, maybe 300 people at the moment on the streets at the another part of an issue we've got, and I see this as a hugely big decision to make. It comes with a precedent risk, and to be honest, I mean, I feel for these people and I want to do everything we can and more, but I concern how this has come up as a mayor's report. I'm not going to even receive. You've got a great mayor's report on other topics, but on this particular topic, I will not be receiving that part. I will be voting against receiving that part of the report because this is presented in a mayor's report. It needs to be a staff officer's report, and for the CEO and for yourself, me and Nick, and for us as the councillors, we need that information rather than on an emotive and play it as it comes a situation. Obviously, we want to move quickly, but this I can't accept or receive this in a couple of paragraphs in a mayor's report. And it's quite a huge precedent and quite a huge topic. And my other question is, are those homeowners aware of what we've got here in front of us today? Have they been spoken to? I don't want to get their hopes up too high or expectations beyond what we can or can do. So I just think this has come a rather out of step. Thank you. Your response from the CEO or chair would be appreciated.
Well, the question for me is, I think I owe it to you when I'm negotiating with government to report on it. For it not to be in my report, being at the most significant event in the last month, in my view, would not be right. I think we have a duty to move this stuff forward as quickly as possible. And I bear the responsibility as mayor to enable this community to recover as quickly as possible from the storms. Gave that commitment when I stood for mayor, and I will do everything in my power to meet those 3 objectives that I outlined at the beginning, and believe this is the responsible way to move forward.
Ask that question in regards to has an opportunity, and a CEO has raised a concern there, which I take on board, is that the officers haven't had a chance to give enough information on these individual properties or this issue as a whole for us to make a sound decision.
Well, we are making a decision today as per the recommendation, subject to the officer's report. We're signalling to the government that we agree in principle with their package. If the real issue for the council today, do you in principle agree with what the government's offered us or not?
Can I ask for the officers or the CEO on their behalf answer that question if the council what we've got in front of us or had an opportunity to whether it's speaking to those homeowners or present to us information to make
on the question of whether I
3.17.
Yeah, sure. On the question of have I met with homeowners? Yes, I have.
Officers?
Sorry, officers have as well. Further to that, I've received a number of reports from the navigators pleading me, these are the navigators that we employed, pleading with me to find a solution for these property owners. So no, I have not met with all. I'd be happy, Alec or member of the staff, Have council staff met with the property owners? I know the navigators would have probably met with all of them because they've met with hundreds.
Alec can give more detail, but actually we don't know the number of properties. We don't know the full number. So, Alec, we want to give a perspective on who we've met with so far.
Through Mayor Nick. So the only residents that we have met are the residents that have approached the mayor, of which I have been sitting in on, but that's only 2 residents.
Can I just check though? Just be careful because Councillor Skinner's question was council staff. It would be my view that the navigators would have met extensively with most of these people, would they have not?
So the navigators haven't approached any landowners or residents. They're there purely to hear from them. They have been approached by a number of people following the notification of the potential buyout, indicating their interest, but they are certainly not there to offer any opinion or view other than to just hear from them and offer their support to those people that are approaching them.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Courtney?
Thanks, Mayor Nick. Now, we're talking here, aren't we, about slips on private land onto other private property, aren't we?
Correct.
That's right.
No, don't just be clear. That is a very good question. The 14 properties, the latest estimate that I've received from the infrastructure manager is that 9 of those 14, and this is changing, 9 of the 14 are from those 18 landslides on council property. So the majority of those slides, the majority of them are ones where it is council land.
How many would it be? Do you know? Or
sorry?
What's the sum? 4? Is it 4 or 5? Are we talking about?
Oh, no, I think with the extra ones in the Brock and some of the stuff I'd prefer to have in workshop because we start talking about people's individual property in council. What I can confidently say to you is the advice I've had from officials is the majority of the 14 are on council-owned landslides.
But the issue raised, I think, is around. I have absolutely no issue with the fact that where our land has caused a problem to landowners, it's a matter for council we must deal with. There is an issue, of course, around we have no legal obligation to deal with private land for private land. Now, of course, there is potentially a moral obligation and a political obligation, and the way we look after our people. That's the debate you're going to have is around. That's the issue. It's those number of houses, and we don't yet know the full number of houses, and that's what you're going to have to grapple with.
Nick, I'm happy to support it. I won't say happy. I won't say that. I'm prepared to support it in principle at this stage, but I do caution us going down this track because there needs to be a cut-off point, a very clear, firm cut-off point. It can't go on ad infinitum. It really can't, because this is ratepayers' money we're talking about, and there comes a point when you've got to say no more, and I just don't want it to get away on us. That's what concerns me.
Understand, Councillor Courtney. Councillor Sanson.
Thanks, through the chair. So I've got a few questions that I sent through. I'll just and I'm wondering if it's possible to get a response from officers, if that's, and maybe if
it is a mayor's report, but if it's appropriate, I'm pretty relaxed. Okay. Can you? Why don't you raise the questions, and I'll make some assessment as to whether they're directly related to my report or information from officers. Councillor Sanson.
Okay. So I'm just wondering what thinking has been done around government, local government, and owner contributions. And I ask that question because that is, effectively what we have here is some kind of retreat from vulnerable land. It's probably wouldn't be seen as managed retreat because an event's happen, but I know that in looking at this kind of retreat matters, there is quite a lot of thinking being done into government, local government and owner contributions. And so I'd really like to understand what thinking's been done around.
Sure. The proposition before you is in the term sheet that's been provided by government. It's a 50-50 deal net. This is very critical. Net of anything received by the property owner from EQC and their insurance. In respect of how that works, what is being proposed here is exactly the same category 3 that is being used in those other 5 districts affected by both the Cyclone Gabriel and the storms. Councillor Sansom?
Can I just clarify that? So are you saying that the government will pay 50%, but that council has to match that 50%? Would it not be possible for the government to cover 50% and then, whatever insurance, EQC, potentially, owner?
No, the
contribution
proposal
set it?
contained on 47 and 48 of the term sheet that came with Grant Robertson's letter is they'll go 50-50 on the net. That is, you take the UKC off, you take the insurance off, and then you get 50-50. Now, there are people who said, well, why don't we try and get 70% out of the government? And yes, you could. The bit that I would say if I was sitting on the government, why would I do a better deal for Nelson as compared with those other areas? What they've effectively put on the table is the equivalent. That is what they've offered. I genuinely think that that is fair.
And can I just ask in relation to that, with the contribution given to other cities, has it been an amount, for example, like in the report we have 6 million contribution from the government towards buyouts, whereas when I read the detail, it actually said a maximum of 14 houses. So, once all the work's done, it may only come to $1 million. So it may only be a $1 million benefit from the government. And would it not be in our interests? I guess it would also be at our cost. If we negotiated a $6 million contribution, it means we also have to match 6 million. Yeah, okay.
Can I be
really complicated?
So if you take Auckland is $1.1 billion cap, but the same principles applies to the agreement, and that is that if it comes out at less than 12, going 50-50 on the net cost, then the Crown's share and our share would both be down. Now, the government is saying if it goes over 12 million, then you're on your own. I would prefer that when we come to finalise the paper at our next council meeting, that we too maintain the position. And look, I'll be very upfront where this came from.
Can I just...
When the property owners approached me, I said we would not provide support unless we had government support of at least 50%. And so my recommendation in answer to your question is that the council should also cap its contribution up to a max of 6.
So my understanding from reading the letter from Grant Robertson was that it's actually a cap of 14 houses.
If you read, the Crown will pay 50% of the net aggregate cost of up to 14 properties, up to a maximum aggregate of 6 million. Now, this is a term sheet.
Can I just...
You've asked the question I want to answer.
No, that's right. So it's 14.
This is a term sheet.
Yeah.
If we agree in principle, then we're going to delegate the job to our council staff, just as they have in those other areas, to then go away and negotiate the final contract. And then the final contract would come back to full council.
So I think, then with an equity lens, what if we have 25 homes or 30 homes, homeowners that feel they're in this situation? I mean, it seems,
my position as mayor, that this would be a decision.
14, yes, 16, tough luck.
Yeah, no, my position as council, my recommendation to the council would be to take the same position I took when this issue was raised publicly in March. And that is, council will contribute up to 50%. If, and I don't think it will, but if it does expand to a number greater than the 14, we would go back to government and to say we are only prepared to provide support for more than 14 if the government comes on board for their 50 share above that. And I do need to be fair to council staff, and that is their 14 estimate was their best they could do on the run until you get all those geotechnical reports on every property. You will not know that number. That might be another 6 months away. Is it fair for us to say, well, we're not going to make a decision until we have the exact number for those that we do know are unrepairable and leave their lives in limbo for another 6 months?
Yeah, okay, thanks. That was my first question. Second one is, what mechanism or planning is there for community engagement into the buyouts? And I ask that because Auckland Council, which is in this situation, is doing a really fast kind of engagement with the community they've got like a Shape Nelson type form goings, and I think they've got a community governance group so that there is community input into the approach that's being taken to the buyouts.
Good question. The Auckland City Council has said that their 50% share of 1.1 billion triggers their significance policy, and they are having to do a special consultative process around that expenditure. Your question, Councillor Sansel, is will we need to do the same? The net effect, or do we want to do the same? And they are both valid questions. My view is one of the downsides of doing a special consultative process, as we found out last year, when we first came to council, we thought we were going to have to do an amendment to the long-term plan for the $50 million of other costs. The cost of doing that amendments to the long-term plan was going to be over $400,000. We got special legal advice and found out that we didn't need to do it. I would much rather be spending the money on fixing things than expensive processes. The decision the council will need to make at its next meeting in October with council advice is whether we need to do a special consultative process on this. And that will be a question where you could decide to do it because you want to. You could decide that you have to because of the legal advice. You could decide that you don't want to do it because it's very expensive. And my personal view is I think there is broad community support for this.
Thanks. Next question is, what is the assessment criteria or approach for deciding which homes are offered a buyout? And I kind of have an equitable outcomes lens across this. So versus other homes impacted that might not get this option, and also the impact on neighbouring property values.
On the question of what will be the criteria, it is proposed in the letter from the Minister of Finance that we would use the same category 3 criteria that is being used for the 5 affected communities. That material is available on the website. If I was to best summarise for you, it is where the cost of making the property safe, according to the geotechnical and technical advice of council, we were prepared to allow them to go back into those homes. If that cost is more than what the property is worth, then effectively it's in that category 3. Your question about will this impact on the property values neighbouring? Here's my personal view. The decrease in neighbouring property values as a consequence of the landslide has already occurred because everybody can see the landslide occur. If we leave those neighbouring properties derelict, in my view, that is the outcome. If we refuse to do anything, they'll end up as derelict properties because they will not have the finance to be able to fix them. That will more negatively impact on those neighbouring properties than if we were to purchase them on this 50-50 arrangement and convert them into public reserves.
And so my final question, and I know that it can't be, or maybe you've kind of given a steer a little bit, but my question was what happens to the land that is subject to the buyout? And why I ask that is I kind of want to know what planning and policy changes will be adopted to ensure that resource and building consents don't continue to be issued for vulnerable locations.
Well, the ultimate guarantee that the houses will not be built on is if the council owns them, because the people around this table directly control what occurs on our land. But it would be my view that as part of our planning changes, and actually my view is there's very good work in Plan Change 29 and improving those risks, those areas that are clearly unsafe to rebuild on would be identified in that plan change as an extra protection.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Pakipaki.
Nā koe ko patua. Ka marihiri. Whakatai mai rā. Au rangatira mā. Tēnā koe te. I found it quite interesting. Sorry, I've got a question, but it's interesting that we've got 2 contrasting positions here where we were hearing from those who are homeless and those who are homeless. Now, on very different ends of the spectrum. And we're talking so easily about spending millions of dollars on a particular group of homeless and considering the other. So, kapai. I just did have a question on item number 3. Do we need in there just specifically that we are going to make a final decision on council? The way I read that last night, I struggled to, it was kind of implying that once we get the report, then we're just, that's a matter of process. That's the first question.
If
It's
you
not
would
a
like,
biggie, because
Yeah,
I think
sure.
you've actually.
can I make plain my intent?
Yeah, come on.
Is that the detailed decision with staff advice is going to be made at that council meeting. What I'm wanting to do today is to lock in the government for support, because there might be a change of government and I don't want to lose the 12.3 million. But nor do I want to cut across. If it was the view of colleagues that you'd prefer to make that absolutely explicit at the end of resolution 3 and add the words and a final decision to be made at the October meeting, I'd be very happy. That's the intent, and I'd be more than happy to have that extra clarity, Councillor Pakipaki. And I can take some views on that if that's wished, but let's just take some further questions.
So,
And then
okay, couple. So the other concern that I have is we're talking about Endgame, $6 million and 14 houses. We've got the variabilities there of the property valuations.
Yeah.
And is it proposal in the early stages, is it going to be an equal distribution of that? Because what you might, my gross fear is obviously a person who owns a very valuable house takes the lion's share of that fund or the money, and of course that limits our ability to be able to, because we think of it as a one for one. If we forget the fact that you live on the hill and they live in the valley, we got to make sure that there's an equitable outcome there for both of those parties. So has that been a discussion?
Yes, it has.
Okay.
Most of the properties affected, I would describe in this community as modest. It is proposed, and let's be very open, and this is something that I would like council officials to give back in their advice in October. Where it's a very modest average home and someone's acted in good faith, they've paid their insurance levies, they've done nothing unusual, then I think this is the right thing to do. If a person has built a $20 million mansion in a high-risk area, do I think the ratepayers and taxpayers should come to the party and out? And I know that other councils are actively considering a cap on where that might be in. I have seen none of the properties that I have seen. I don't want to discuss their individual circumstances. None of them fall in that category, but I would be quite open, Councillor Pakipaki, when the final policy comes through for it to have a cap so that we're providing support for modest homeowners.
And I guess, so would it be possible that when the report arrives that there is a explicit, part in there that to
yes, and my other commitment,
give us some guidance into what?
Yes, and the other guidance is I have given a commitment to hold a workshop within a fortnight with council staff, because I prefer in people's individual property information was not discussed in open session.
My microphone won't turn off.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, kia ora. I'd be supportive and supporting in principle cost sharing package. I'd be looking forward to more informed debate and workshopping this once we do have a officer's report.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. The Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Stella. Can I just make clear, this is a big issue. I'm not going to force the time frame on it. This is a time for questions, and then I'm going to then ask officers to then we'll have the debate on the resolution. So we're still in the question section, and so councillors should not feel constrained at all in keeping their questions quite focused, so because they will have the opportunity to make a contribution in the debate. I'm the Deputy Mayor.
Thanks. Just noting that it's 35 days until our next council meeting. I am just curious, Alec, when you think you'd have staff advice ready on this issue?
Through Manic, I'm planning to meet the deadline for the next council meeting. There's a lot of work happening in the background as to where that lands. We'll see. I'm listening to the views around the table. There's a lot more things I need to consider, but at this moment in time, I will do whatever I need to do to try and make that council meeting.
I guess where I was going with that question is there any potential for getting that advice earlier than the 19th of October?
Just listening to the debate around the council table, I would say no.
Okay.
So the plan is to have a workshop within a fortnight. Then that'll give time, and I want to get the time between that workshop before Alec finalises his report on the substance of the issue for that next council meeting. And the trade-off we're trying to do here is one of being reasonable to staff, but also trying to get resolution for these property owners.
Yeah, well, and that's my concern is that for 35 days, we've sort of now have this issue out without any certainty being provided. In terms of this specific and building on Councillor Sampson's question around requirement to consult, have staff tested this issue as to whether or not there is a requirement there?
I think probably Nikki McDonald. I'm sorry. Alan,
No, I
happy
can
to take
certainly
your
answer that. We are certainly have that in our on our radar, and we are busy testing that as both an SLT and through other means, and that'll form the basis of the advice that I give council.
And then just a clarification question around the, there's been discussion of the 1.1 billion government support package to Auckland. How much of that is actually for property buyouts?
From my understanding, I think they've done an estimate based on about 700 from what I've read.
My understanding was about 2/3 of the Auckland package is for buyouts.
That's it.
Councillor Stella.
Thanks, Nick. I just wonder, is there a deadline with the government's offer of support? And just how likely would it be that a government would bring this offer to the table and then at some stage within the next month or so say, actually, we're withdrawing that, considering that there's billions up north in a similar package? What do you think is the likelihood of that actually happening?
I think there's a low likelihood of it being completely withdrawn, but with all these, the devil's in the detail. And my view is in the period, just be very direct, and that is that when devil's in the detail, my view is the sooner that we can allow our officials to finalise that agreement, it is my view that post the 14th of October, whoever is government is going to be financially a lot tighter, and there may be the risk. So, for instance, I would like the condition in the deal that the council's contribution be not more than 14 properties and not more than 6 million. And I think we are in a better position to negotiate the detail of the contract flowing on from the term sheet in the pre-election period. Here's my further concern. After the general election, you may have what we call a caretaker government for a period of up to 2 to 3 months, depending on, you all know how long Winston has sometimes made it drag out. Every month that happens makes it a longer period for the families that are affected. And so my preference is for us to get as much settled as possible before the government moves into caretaker mode on the 14th of October. Any other questions? Councillor Skinner.
Cool, cheers. I appreciate this is a mayor's report, not an officer's report, but obviously I'm asking questions of both yourself there. Just to get concerned, good putting a cap on the amount and number of houses, but your comment before, unless I've got that wrong, Nick, was that if the government comes forward to go more than 14 houses, you said we would fund more than 14 houses. Seems to be an endless pot.
We don't know how many properties are affected, and nor do they know in the other councils. When this issue was confronted with me about these people in limbo land, I said to those property owners, council, I could not recommend to council supporting them unless we had government support. I think what occurred was that then those property owners lobbied the government. Government realised the inequity. And so what I am saying is that I just want to keep to the principle of where there are properties in this awful situation. I'm prepared. I recommend council support up to 50-50. If there's more than 14, we go back to government. We will not know, in my view, the resolution of all of these landslides and the geotechnical advice and what the designs and the fix will be another couple of year process.
And this is where officers or staff I still see, and officers tell me I've got it wrong, there's a lack. You've done obviously everything you can, and more. I'm talking to officers there, but there still needs to be more clarity for us to make a good governance decision. It becomes a bit of a moral decision here. We've got 100, maybe 300 homeless. previous term, we struggled and denied putting $1 or $2 million into our Maitai camp, Brook camp, for the long termers for 20, 30, 50, 100 people. Yet we're talking about 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million, 6 million plus million for this situation. And yet we struggled last term and denied 1 million to get 40, 50, 100 people who desperately need housing. I'd love to see that in the Mayor's report. I can't support this. I'm just giving you some heads up. I realise this is question time, but unless I've got this wrong, unless officers aren't struggling with the same thing, this is not the place. And I think you need to put this labus on the table.
My challenge, I've in response, Councillor Skinner, I have two responses. The first is I don't think it's fair for you to say of the Mayor that I am disconnected or not concerned about the homelessness problem.
I haven't said that.
You implied that.
Point of order, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's a decision that we are making very quickly.
You made the comparison, and it is, I would note in my Mayor's report, I'm also recommending changes in the task force around housing, and later in the agenda, an expansion of the terms of reference for the housing task force to deal with exactly that issue. In respect of your other point, here's my challenge for you. If this is not the answer for those people, please tell me what is. Because in asking that question for 6 months, nobody else has been able to give me a better solution.
I don't think there's time I can give you an answer right now, but I think this is a bigger picture. But if you're enabling me, the scope, we've got Brook Maitai camps, which can house many people, and we've got them empty. I went up there yesterday. It was completely silent. The cabins, we're struggling with consent obligations for the Maitai, which would probably require another $500,000 to $2 million. And the Brook, we could have pumping for people in not just long-term, but medium-term residency, people in great need. And we seem to be fairly flippant today about a decision which is going to cost us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 million, or it might go beyond that. I think to make this decision very clear, we either go back and think of our scope of what we're doing in the housing issue, or B, we need the right officer report and the confidence from the CEO and the officers that we've got that information in front of us. I appreciate you going to another meeting to deal with this, but this is a big topic.
Can I just tease out, because I am going to Councillor Skinner, give you the opportunity to debate the issue. At this point in the meeting, I'm wanting to focus on questions. Is there a further question you wish to ask?
No, I've made my point.
Councillor Bench.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. Firstly, it's fantastic that we got the offer of this money. And I know you should never look a gift horse in the mouth, but I have 3 questions and a clarification. If we say yes to this, are we agreeing to it in principle to be debated later and decided later, or are we agreeing to it?
First thing was we are agreeing in principle, just as other councils went through this process. I'm then going to be asking our Chief Executive and the staff to sit down with the government and to convert the term sheet into an agreement. I'm then wanting them to come back with that agreement and the full advice on whether we need a special consultative process after the workshop to then make the final decision.
Okay, first question is, if we buy out or subsidise the buying out of properties which are private land to private land, are we legally setting a precedent or not?
We are not legally setting a precedent. We have no legal obligation. It is correct to say that we are setting a political precedent, right? That is true. So does it mean that in future we have to do this? No. But it is, I think, to be honest, that you are saying that you're increasing the political pressure to do so. That is exactly the same dilemma that the government and the other councils have faced. And thus, my argument, and I'll be very public about it, the circumstances of August 2020 were extraordinary. And when you have extraordinary events, you sometimes need to do unusual things to fix the problem, particularly when you don't have other alternatives.
So we're setting a moral and political precedent.
We have done it before, and this council made a decision at its last October meeting to do just that on one property. It is not unforeseen for council to buy property in this circumstance, but every circumstance is different.
Okay, second question. If we buy these properties, private to private, when are we going to know the possible risks of further slipping from that land? Because I want to know what we're signing the citizens of Nelson up for. This seems a wonderful opportunity, but we are signing the citizens of Nelson up for this forever. And if it's a slip like the one on the Tahuna Hills that's going to go on for the next 1,000 years, is that what we're doing, or is it?
My answer.
So when are we going to know that?
Well, council at its last meeting decided to purchase a property that was a landslide up the brook. When we decided to purchase that property and we become the landowner, it is true that in respect of that landslide, if it further shifts or does further damage, we are the landowner. But here's the difficult question I have for you, Councillor Benj, and for others, and it's this. If you've got landslides in your community and it's totally inappropriate to build on them, who is the best owner for those? And it is my honest view that rather than being derelict, and there are derelict properties in this area that have been there that way for ages because they're put in the too hard basket, it is my view that properties that are inappropriate to build on and have got landslides on them are best planted out and are best in council ownership for the overall protection of the community. Matthew?
Sure, but if we did nothing, you'd probably end up with them anyway, because no one's going to build on them.
If we don't do this, I tell you what I think will happen. If we don't do this, those property owners will be left in limbo land forever. They will have no money. The properties will be full of weeds. The buildings will become derelict, and it'll just be in the too hard basket, of which we have some right now.
I accept that, man, Nick, but I think it's important to point out that we had a legal requirement to buy out the last property because we caused it. We don't have a legal requirement this time.
All right. Last question. The money from government comes, it's capped. So is the number at 14. So if we get 20 that meet the criteria, how do you choose the 6 that don't get it?
Well, we are asking the hypothetical, and that same dilemma, Matthew, faces the other 6 councils in the same position, and we will not know that final number even at our next meeting. And the reason for that is you do a geotechnical assessment of the site. It takes some time to determine how much it requires to get the risk down to acceptable and to then work out what the engineering cost of that fix is. My view is that this decision should be based on the advice that there are, and it is an estimate, up to 14, that if there are more than 14, the council only agrees to providing support in the event that there is additional support from government.
I understand that, and I don't really care what other councils do because councils make stupid decisions sometimes, and I don't want this to be one of them. And but if there are 20 houses, it's all right if there's 14 houses or less, and then further things happen, and we can't get any further support from government, you've got that covered. But if there's 20 and they do meet the criteria, you're stuck with telling 6 of them, we haven't chosen you. Sorry, Sonny.
Sure. And I accept that that is a dilemma, but I tell you that that is going to be a dilemma in October. And if you want to make that decision at any stage, my view is that difficult problem, agreement in principle to go to 50-50. Best information we have is that is $6 million. We're also getting the $6 million that we've already committed. So fiscally for this council, those 2 bits way out because we weren't expecting to get the $6 million for our council-owned slides on the betterment. And there is a risk and a difficulty down the track on that point that you raised, Councillor Benj.
Well, it worries me because legally you say we haven't set a precedent, but, you know, you as mayor or we as council have said that morally and politically we do. And I can't see how you would not be setting yourself up to pay for those other 6 properties. I cannot see.
The council has no legal obligation. We are quite entitled to say we're going to have a budget of 6 million for this and we're only going to do 14. And my view is that if we had a legal obligation, we could go beyond it. But because we're being, in my view, pragmatic to cap it is a reasonable position. Are there any other questions?
But you have to pick that 14. Well, who's going to be on that panel?
Well, that dilemma is based on the assumption that it will be more than 14 and we can only do things on the best estimate.
Yeah.
And it is also my view that you will not have that exact number, I suspect, for at least 6 or 12 months. It's my honest view as to how long it's going to take for all that to be worked through. Again, here's how I'd like to proceed. I'd like to take the last couple of questions. I'd then like to adjourn for a morning tea break. And I'd then like to come back and debate the resolution. I'm just going to take the last questions. Did I have a question from Councillor Hodgson?
Yeah, look, just a question for the Chief Executive. Are you confident that Resolution 3, if we proceed with that in principle, that if the proposal on further research proves to be unviable for the community, that we could back out?
Yeah, look, I think I've heard today that you're not making a decision today. So look, and that's my preference is I accept you wanting to give an indication of where you're heading. My preference is you make a decision on the basis of fact or as much fact as I can provide with you. So look, my view is in October, if the fact I bring to you is unpalatable, then you could potentially, you must back out.
Councillor Sanson?
Thanks through the chair. I think Aaron has been, Councillor Stallard has been waiting maybe for questions, but I'll go. Okay. Is it because some of these properties are council land onto private land and we're looking at the cost to repair being significant, obviously more than the value of the property, is there a possibility that it could in fact cost council less by doing this, if rather than if it costs $2 million to build a retaining wall to protect one house, and yet we end up maybe buying that house out for half of 900,000, let's say 450,000, we've saved ourselves 1.5 million.
Here's where
is there a possibility that that could be the situation?
Yes, but here's where the situation starts. We have a legal obligation around $6 million to fix the 18 and put back as is those 18 landslides on council property. So that's 6. We made a decision, and I support the decision, to not spend 6, but 17.2 to not just put them back the way they were, but make them safe. We've had one of those identified as being more expensive to fix than what it's worth, and we've taken a decision to buy it out. Now, in respect of your question, Councillor Sanson, yes, you could save money if you bought some of those properties out. And what's happening is as more geotechnical advice comes in, the cost on more than one of those 18 landslides makes them more economic to buy. The reason I don't think there will be a saving is for this reason. If our position was to revert back to just do the back to as is, yes, there would be. But I still believe the right thing for the community to do is the betterment. If you ask me my best guess of the financial impact, getting 6 million that we weren't expecting, that we'd committed to on the betterment, a half share, and committing 6 to the buyouts, in my view, is going to be about even. The bit where I think there will be some extra cost will be in terms of, well, what do you do with those properties, of which many of them are on these council-owned slips of which we have a liability for the plant out and removing the buildings. And that's which Alec will get us some more information, but I even think in a month's time, they'll still be in the category of estimates.
So then my next question is really around the recommendations we've got in front of us. Given that I've heard we're not making a final decision today, we are agreeing in principle to a cost sharing package. I mean, I also think it's great to have a cost sharing package, and I'm happy that the government is, supporting our council and community in that way. I still have some discomfort around recommendation 4 and that, kind of the number of houses that we're identifying. And I just wonder if it's unnecessary to specify that. Given that we've got so many unknowns, I wondered whether you would consider just removing recommendation number 4 and letting recommendation number 3 kind of carry.
Yeah, the reason I have a different point of view, remember, recommendation 4 is just a note. I wish to send a signal to the community that this is up to 14. And I think having that resolution on the books is a means for us to maintain that this is based on the advice of there being about 14. And if that number goes above that, then I want to have the option to go back to government and to say, come on, guys, we've acted in good faith. We might need some more. So I think we would make our position weaker if we were to remove the specific note of the up to 14, which is consistent with the agreement I've negotiated with the government.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Let's break for morning tea. When we return from morning tea, it is my intention to take the mover and the seconder and to enable a full debate on these resolutions 2, 3 and 4. Council is adjourned until 11:15. To a formal debate on items and resolutions 3, 4 and 5 of the Mayor's report. It's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Brand, a member of the task force. I think there's been quite a good amount of indirect discussions through the questions, so I'm going to keep my comments as mover very brief. The reason I believe it's important today for Council to agree in principle to the cost sharing agreement with the Crown is because we're giving a signal that that is the direction we wish to go. If the view is of councillors that you do not wish to go down this road, then we should not have the staff and the team put all the effort into the work, both government officials and council officials, to come back to council with a final agreement. But I wish to emphasise that agreement in principle still has the off-ramp that if you receive the advice and the detail of the government's offer, then there is the opportunity for council to say no. My second point is that, yes, it's been absolutely proper that council officers and councillors have raised questions. This is a big deal. But it is my view that it is the best pathway forth, and I don't think there are any other alternatives for dealing with these particular properties that is practical. My view is that if we do not go down the road of a 50-50 type buyout, we will end up with that route of those families being in limbo land for years into the future, that the properties will be derelict and unrepairable and be eyesores in our community. My last point is, I rate Nelson as a caring, pragmatic community. And if council today votes no to the in-principle cost-sharing agreement with government, we would effectively be saying that we are a less generous community and families are of need than many other 5 other councils that have agreed to this very pragmatic response to extraordinary storm events. So it is my view that this is the right thing for us to do. I acknowledge that the process is pressured because of wanting to get resolution to these storm-related matters and the issues of these landslides, and seek the support of council in agreeing to the $12.3 million package that has been offered by the Minister of Finance in principle. Would the seconder like to speak?
I'd like to save it to the end, if that's okay.
That's more than open to the seconder. Other contributions, Councillor Hodgson.
Yeah, look, the words moral and social obligation have been used today. I think my vision for Nelson is being a community that rallies around when people are in crisis. And we have drawn parallels to the discussion around homelessness. And similarly, I would advocate and have advocated for the task force to be set up in that space. When I look at the families affected by this issue, I also see households that have no other option. And so in principle, yes, I absolutely agree with these recommendations. Subject to council does have a responsibility to diligently look into the detail. And so subject to that officer assessment, happy to support this.
Thanks, Councillor Hodgson. I'll take Councillor Stallard.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, so we've been told there will be a workshop and a full report at the October meeting, and that's good process. And in contrast, there's very little information for us today. So to my mind, this is what we're discussing now is as much about process as the end result in supporting these people in need. So we're being asked to agree in principle, subject to the full report later. I think it's important that we consider why we would want to agree in principle today rather than just wait, because there are pros and cons to what's before us. As me and Nick has said, the pros are we're sending signals both to government and to the affected homeowners. There are some cons as well. We do have an absence of information. We cannot assess risk. We might be setting up expectations that won't be met with the final decision. And we know that in terms of sending that signal to government, there is no deadline from the government, and me and Nick said there is a low likelihood of that offer being retracted. So to my mind, it's such an early stage in this process. And this is really the start of a big nationwide discussion about how we do retreat or how we do handle collectively damage to properties from natural disasters. And that's all not in place yet. Where does the responsibility lie between the homeowners insurance, EQC, local and central government, and so on? So it's a very early stage in this discussion. So there are two aspects. Short term, helping these people who are suffering and need help. Longer term, what is our policy around these kind of situations? Personally, I would rather we weren't being asked to agree in principle today. I think the cons of that outweigh the benefits. My preference would be that we left item 2 on the table, but I won't be moving that. But that's just my opinion. I do think when staff bring the report next month, I would like to see that all options considered in terms of the financial details. And we have heard some discussion from Councillor Pakapaki and others about having a financial cap. And I do think we do have moral obligation. We also want to avoid moral hazard, which is when, and this is looking longer term, it's not the case of these 14 houses now. It's when someone undertakes more risk than they might otherwise because they believe another party is going to bear the cost of that risk if something goes wrong. So I think looking at a cap is a good idea, and perhaps it might be at the very highest, either the market value or the average house price in that region. So we're not getting into a situation where we have multi-million-dollar properties being built or upgraded in high risk areas, and council being seen as the insurer of last resort for those properties. So yeah, my preference is that this wasn't before us today, but it is. I'd like to hear the views of others around the table as to whether they would like to see this on the table.
Thanks, Councillor Stallard. Councillor Sanson.
Thanks, through the chair. Yeah, so I concur with Councillor Stallard in that I feel like we have, first of all, this is a really significant decision. I am absolutely here for this discussion, and I think it is something that a conversation we should be having broadly with our community about how we plan for retreat from vulnerable areas. This is maybe the first real instance of this happening in our region, but there's going to be a lot more situations like this in the future. And so, what we're doing here is precedent setting, and I think that we need to really be going into this and making these decisions with plenty of information, and also with the view of the community voice at the table. I also think that we really need to have a very strong equity lens around this. I would even go a step further than Councillor Stallard and suggest that we have, maybe a capped amount that, why not 6 million divided by 14 homes, for example? I think that we should, I think that we need to be very careful about unintentionally subsidising people who have expensive homes in more expensive parts of the city at the expense of, all ratepayers, some who really struggle to pay their rates, or homeowners who, haven't been able to afford to build up such wealth. And I think it's, we're going to have to, it's going to be a really difficult discussion. So I would prefer that we were doing this with a lot more information and having a broader discussion with the community. But I also absolutely understand that there's, it's immensely stressful for the families, and it's absolutely, unbearable situation for them to be in. So I guess I'm not going to vote against it, but I wish we had a lot more information before we were making this decision, and we're making it more broadly in terms of how we're going to react to it, handle these situations for everybody in our community, not just these affected homes.
Thanks, Councillor Sanson. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you there. Much of it I've already raised my view during the discussion time in my concerns, and obviously it's a topic that needs to be fully understood, and sometimes you just got to take a punt on understanding it as it develops. So yes, I commend you, Mayor Mick, and what you've done to push this along. But I also caution that what may be a campaign promise and a strong desire is commendable, but also remember we are not a caucus as such, and many of us have campaign promises that we are pushing as well. And obviously this is a juggling act, and I really feel for CEO and staff and their concerns have risen, and I hope we can work through to get to a point where this is a good outcome for all. I juggle with obviously it's our right to put right, it's our obligation to put right where our land or ratepayer or public land slips onto a private or neighbouring property. That is something that we do and must do. I struggle a bit when it becomes private versus private land, and it's obviously really reaching out to see what the community wish us to do there. I also use this opportunity to point out when we, as previous council, seem to have been challenged to make decisions on whoever spent a few $1 million to retain the living quarters of those in our campsites, the cabins, and same with the pensioner flats. Its decision obviously has been made in the past, but we were grizzling over $30,000 a year of ratepayers' money, or kick out, for a better word, 144 pensioners. And some of those pensioners are in cars right now because they're on the back of that queue. And it was nice that Jackie Garland came to remind us where we're at and what her feelings are and where things could be improved or what may be the cause of that. And we've got good people there that we're also morally obliged, or just humanitarian obliged, to look after. But no lesser for those people who fully own their homes too. Also, I feel incredibly for. I know I've been in situations a little bit similar, and it's sleepless nights. Sleepless nights. I've been in a situation you think, shivers, this is going to be 50, 100,000. Insurance may not cover it, etc. And you've spent many years building up something to give you some sort of security for you and your kids. So I feel for right across the board, and I know us around this council, we are beyond just resolutions and process. Our hearts are there with the community as a whole. So I'll support this going forward in principle, so that we can make sometimes emotional, unemotional decisions. That's a position we've been put in, a difficult put in. We're damned if we do, damned if we don't. But I do just urge, when we've got $6 million in the housing fund from the pensioner flats, and it seems to be similar to what we've got here for these properties, and the more we can do, the better. But please, just, I don't want to get people's hopes up, and I hope we can do for everyone and more so, but please keep that in temper when we look at other decisions that we make. And I think we might need to reprioritise our priorities. We spend a lot of energies and money on climate change, etc., and rating for this and that. And I think we've got to come back to our core responsibility, which is making sure we're looking after our residents, our communities, and our infrastructure to support that, so we don't incur more slips, etc., and on our land, and what we can do for those good people who own their houses or don't own their houses. So I support this going forward, and I hope we can do something better. But we will have to, when it comes to long-term plan, we will have to be a little bit more disciplined, and those nice to haves, I would like to see those drop in support of what we've got here on the table today, to support those who may or may not have a roof over their head.
Thanks, Councillor Scarr. Councillor Campbell, Rollo.
Thanks, Mayor Nick, and I will keep it brief. August 2022, family and people had their lives changed. In fact, we all did. We had a storm in this region like no other. For some, we were out campaigning, trying to get onto the local council, or simply telling our friends just to go and vote for us. For some, they had to leave their homes on a one-way order, and that order was, you might not return home. 12 months on, those people still haven't returned home. It took central government 12 months to come to the party, thanks to your great campaigning on behalf of us, to get them to bring some funds. What we do moving forward is what we should all do in Nelson, and that's locals helping locals. I hate to say it, but this won't be the first or the last time that this sort of report comes back to our council. Climate change is happening, and we will have disasters again in the future. I urge us all to support this because we must. It's what we do in the community. I was speaking to a member of the public just last week whose house was red stickered in August last year, and I simply gave him a smile and I said, good news, the government's given some money. And he looked at me and he said, I still don't know what that means. I have to continue to wait. That man will now wait longer than a year to know what's going to happen to his house. Just 2 weeks ago, one weekend, I was out on community patrol working with some volunteers travelling around our region. We travelled past this man's house and it was just sitting there in pitch black with mud all around it. I returned home at 2:30 a.m. in the morning, and as I looked at that house yet again, the windows had been broken on that man's property. And I saw him on that Monday and I said, what happened to your house on the weekend? And then he goes, well, it's sitting there, so some young thugs decided that they'll go and have a look to see what was going on. That man will still not know in a month's time what's going to happen. We have this wonderful promise, and thanks to you, the government's come to the party with the money, but we must take a serious consideration around this, and we must take the community on board with us. In the last week or so, if we haven't taken the community on board, we've certainly heard what they have to say. So I urge us to simply consult this in a good, productive manner. Thank you.
The Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Menik. This is a deeply emotive and personal challenge. We have people out of their homes, a place of security, and for many, their largest piece of financial investment. We, as leaders within the city, need to acknowledge and hold space for that emotion, but we also need to step back and look at the wider considerations and implications here. That is our role, that is our job. And I think we need to make sure that we are policy setting based on the best available information at hand. There is a lot of moving parts within this picture, fundamentally because we are policy setting with people's lives and livelihoods. And we have to do that because the work has not yet been done to have consistent frameworks for how we are going to manage and deal with what will be, as Councillor Rollo touched on, more and more frequent events, and we will see more and more of this. The heart of this issue is really around that private land onto private land. And I have no qualms in saying that as a community, we should care for one another and we should support one another as much as possible. But we also need to make sure that within these conversations, we're looking at the future, the precedent, because there will be precedent set. That is fundamental, and that is okay, provided that we're setting that precedent with a clear understanding of what goes into the future. With an in-principle decision and taking that to its meaning, and with my principles, again, I will support that clause because principally we should care and support for one another. It's the second part of that clause around detailing the implications and future costs to council that is where this debate will hinge, and where we need to make sure that we're providing a clear pathway into the future as well and for future events. I can't support clause 4 because I just don't know whether it'll be up to 14 properties, and with the evidence in front of us, I just don't think that we can make a call as to say that we'll only support 14 properties, because I think from a precedent setting perspective, that would be unjust to pick and choose or do a first in, first served basis. We need to make sure that we have a consistent framework to work with here. I think it's hard to compare the deal we have in front of us to the deal in front of other councils for the simple basis of scale. We're talking about $12 million from the government as opposed to hundreds of million, if not 1.1 billion. And also noting that within other cost sharing packages, significant money has been given to flood resilience. And I'm disappointed that we haven't received flood resilience funding, because we know that it will continue to be an issue into the future and that we will see more of this. We don't know what we don't know. And there are things that we know that we won't know. And we need to have all of that in front of us and make a decision that can provide clear justice, both for those here now and into the future. And I think there's actually a lot of agreement around the table on this, is we don't want to see homes sitting there unoccupied, degrading away. That is not a positive outcome. The question is, how do we get to the best outcome, and how do we ensure the equitable spread of those costs, and how do we make sure that government coming to the party is not a one-off, and that our community can pay for the future events that we know we will see. And I think that this has highlighted the need for a clear national strategic framework that I hope we can see urgently developed. It is my view that we can't proceed on this without community engagement and consultation because of that need of precedent setting. And we need to be having a wider conversation with the community about how much we're willing to spend, where it is, and what we're willing to lose as part of this. My final reflection is that yesterday I spent the afternoon with a couple of other councillors at our workshop on our regional climate change risk assessment. And the picture painted is stark, is we will see, again, more and more of this. And so I'm supporting this today with the knowledge that we need to do a significant body of work to make sure that when this comes up in future, we're not still leaving homeowners in limbo, because this won't solve it. And even when we reach the 19th of October and make a final decision on this issue, it won't solve it for future homeowners as well. And that's where there is an urgent need for further work, both locally and nationally, because the pain and heartache and that state of limbo is something that we all want to shorten and avoid as much as possible.
Good. And then Councillor Brand.
I'm just wondering whether we could take the recommendation in parts. With this,
Let me look after that afterwards. Let me complete the debate, and then we'll see where people are wanting to go.
Yeah.
Councillor Brand. Oh, no, I'm just going to take Councillor. You indicated you would prefer to speak near the end as the seconder. Councillor Bench. Councillor Brandon indicates you wish to speak later. I think she's happy for Councillor Bench to go first.
Yeah, I've reserved my right to speak at the end as the seconder.
Okay. I don't believe this flood was a one-off. And we've just had it predicted 3 years drier summers than usual. Dry summers equal slips, which might sound back to front, but it's not. When it does rain after long dry periods, that's when you get the worst slips. And I don't believe our weather's going to get better, if there's such a thing as better or worse weather, because weather's really just weather. But I don't think this flood that we had is the worst one we're going to see. So these questions are going to come up more and more. FS 8 is due, but that's a whole different scenario. I thank Councillor Paki for pointing out about the difference in value of houses, because I hadn't considered that. When people originally started building or making places to live in Nelson, they didn't do it beside the rivers or at the bottom of a hill, which clearly you don't get a hill unless bits have fallen off it. And everybody knew that. But you get a lot more money for a view. So a view's worth at least $100,000. And some of these are possibly being stuck there because of that view that they wanted. So there is an inequity in paying out whatever their particular house happens to be valued at, because a view has nothing to do with having a roof over your head. And it seems to me that we keep coming up now that this is possibly losing a bit of traction. I'm not saying it's failing, but that we get words like, you know, we want to be a generous, caring community. This is emotional. We've got moral obligations. And we do. But if that was true about us, we wouldn't have the homeless and the hungry. We wouldn't have them. It's not just now that it's happened. If I went down to the Bridge Street now with a meal in one hand and said to one of those guys, sat down beside him and said, hey, you can have this meal, or I can guarantee you the council will put on a task force to look at it. I know I'd come back without the meal. So I don't like the idea of, to get this over the line, we're heading to these emotional, generous, caring, moral stuff, because the proof is in the pudding. A good society looks after those who can't look after themselves. And it's making me question this whole thing. They don't vote. Might be as simple as that, because they don't. But we're very, very concerned over a less amount of people for a massive amount of money. And we may be signing our citizens up for this for a long, long time. And I guess this is going to go through, but I hope no one looks back in some years to come and says they weren't good ancestors.
I have a time dilemma issue that I just want to be very open with the council and how I'd like to handle it. The Chief Executive has organised legal advice in respect of the resolution that's been moved and seconded by Councillor Courtney and seconded by Councillor Benj. The legal advisor, Sue Piper, has a plane to catch, and if I don't get that straight away, we're not going to be able to hear that. I'd like to have the discretion from the chair for us to adjourn this item, to immediately move into committee and to hear that legal advice while the lawyer that's been commissioned is available. My view is that that is likely to take until 12:15, and then we will come back to this item with remaining contributions and put the resolution. I do think it's sufficiently important that we do get that legal advice, and I'm going to, the only alternative would be I don't think we can consider it.
I would like to put my amendment first. And then I was understood, it was explained to me that I would put it first, then we'd go into confidential business.
I was unaware that the legal advisor, this item has taken more time than I expected. I assure Councillor Courtney that I will give you the opportunity to discuss it, but the only way I can ensure council gets access to the legal advice is for me to take that course of action. So I'm going to move from the chair that we adjourn the discussion on the government support package for August floods 2022, and that we move into committee to hear legal advice from Sue Piper, DLL Piper.
Clarification, Mr. Mayor, will we be debating the plan change in public?
My assurance is that when we come out, the sole issue for being in committee is receiving legal advice, which is always the situation, whether it be any governance body I've been involved in. I can assure the member that the discussion will occur in open session. I moved. Can I have a...
No, Mayor Nick, if the legal advice, and I'm struggling to sort of think what on earth the legal advice could be, but if it is around the fact that my amendment is suggesting we withdraw plan change stating we withdraw plans to change 29. Well, as far as I'm concerned, we're our own masters
Mel,
Of course we can.
can I ask you then to indulge me,
No,
please,
no,
as Chief
I'll just let-
Executive?
I'll just let-
Of course,
Yes, just let Mel Courtney finish and then I will come to the Chief Executive, which I think is appropriate. Councillor Courtney, you have the floor.
my thought is this, that if it is around, if the advice is purely around whether we can withdraw Plan Change 29 or not, well, my view is that we're our own masters in this world. We haven't advanced the Plan Change 29 very much at all from its original establishment, and that, in my judgment, and perhaps I could say the advice of others as well in this matter, of course we can. Of course we can.
I'm in a real dilemma because on the one hand, could I just have a quick indication of the show of hands of those councillors that want to hear that legal advice before we consider the amendment from Councillor Courtney?
And I need to express my permission that as Chief Executive, I ask you to hear this. It can be brief and we will come back into public forum for full debate. But please trust me as Chief Executive, I would like you to hear this. My legal advisor needs to get on an aeroplane. She's been very indulgent in waiting for this. Please, Mel, I ask you to indulge me.
I've moved that we go into confidential.
I've moved the motion. I'm going to take the second bit from Councillor Skinner simply because time is of the essence. I do ask for council's indulgence. I'm going to put the resolution, and that is that we adjourn the discussion on the flood recovery, go into confidential section to specifically get legal advice from Sue Piper. Those in favour, please say aye. Those contrary, say no. That is carried. I apologise to the public. It is my intention, just for members of the public, that we should be back in session with respect to the flood recovery and the plan change, other issues, by about 12:15. Is Astrid